Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking your time out of your busy schedule to meet with us here. I wanted to take some time to really talk about what's going on in the world today, what people have been doing, what they need to be doing, and how to get there from here. Now, I'm going to roll us back a little bit because it has been, as everybody knows, an interesting year for everybody. COVID-19 really changed almost everything everywhere. It's on us to figure out what of those changes are going to be the, if I hate this term, new normal, and what gets to revert back to less crazy times. So let's back up a little bit as we start to get going forward. Let's rewind back to March. Beginning of March, we knew things were going on in other places in the world, but it landed here with a thud, big time. Everybody in IT everywhere had to scramble. Suddenly we had people being told on Friday, just after they left the office, you're not coming back Monday. Everybody scrambled to figure out how to enable business to continue and create some form of resilience between Friday afternoon and Monday morning. Mad scramble was the order of the day. Now, life did settle down and slowed down a little bit. And as I noted here, we all hoarded toilet paper and Lysol and started learning how to make our own bread again, etc. Life got different real fast. And everybody started getting awfully familiar with things like Zoom and Teams and Slack. But companies were able to actually breathe a momentary sigh of relief because work continued. Suddenly that idea of everybody has to be in one spot, that cast in stone notion, got really called into question. Because quite frankly, work from home, work from anywhere actually worked. So I said that we were all in a mad scramble. What did that look like? What did we do? Well, for a lot of companies, it was a mass purchase of laptops, hardware to ship to remote people. At the end of the day, people did exactly what they thought they knew how to do and turned laptops, tablets, webcams into the toilet paper of the IT world. Jumped through massive hoops trying to figure out how to enable a order of magnitude increase in remote work just right out of the gate. As a side effect of taking that path, and a lot of people pushing those laptops out, trying to get everybody to connect via VPN. We all know how questionably stable VPN connections really are, even under the best of circumstances. VPN largely got pushed beyond its intended use from a bandwidth perspective, from a technology perspective, trying to get someone in accounting to figure out A, how to connect, B, how to reconnect several times to get the client to actually connect and stay connected. Well, that was a challenge in and of itself. But we also discovered through this process that the IT infrastructure that we'd been using for years inside the office doesn't necessarily work well across remote. You know, for applications that do some local processing and then interact with a database, well, that database was still inside the office or at the colo. And the network connections coming in from some of the least secure networks with the most challenging bandwidth constraints, namely the home networks, introduced huge amounts of latency to those kinds of implementations. The net takeaway there was what always works in the office doesn't always work well remote. So new solutions had to be brought to the fore, new ways of looking at things and doing things. And since I mentioned those home networks, a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of companies have discovered that connecting your pristine corporate network and all of your, well-protected corporate data and assets directly to home networks creates unbelievable numbers of security problems. The attack surface for bad actors in the IT world, the black hats, if you will, grew exponentially. In just that month of March, 147% increase in ransomware attacks. That number more than doubled and doubled again over the next month and change after that. And the new attack surfaces, those same home networks that you just extended your corporate network to include. But even with all of those challenges, we did discover that remote work actually can and does work, and in some cases, even better than in office. Quite frankly, people weren't burning huge amounts of time doing things like commuting, etc. But we're able to, in the modern world, roll out of bed, hit the traffic stop at the coffee machine, and pop straight in. Get to work on what they needed to do without nearly so much a distraction. So, what did we learn from all of this? Because this was one hell of a practical exercise. Well, a lot of folks learned that if they had already had a VDI implementation, their life would have been an order of magnitude easier. Properly built VDI implementations don't need VPNs. They don't even really need endpoint devices shipped, but I'll get into that in a little bit later. Pardon me. We discovered really quickly, because lots of people throughout the industry started looking at VDI, and what we discovered was those legacy VDI vendors were hugely complex and unbelievably expensive. They weren't built to be rapid reactionary. They were built, for a world that doesn't really exist in the same sense anymore, especially not at the SMB and mid-market levels and the distributed enterprise. Now, on top of figuring that out, IT guys discovered that their legacy virtual infrastructures didn't always scale terribly well to handle all of that rapid change, that sudden need for a remote workforce. They discovered in a hurry that, maybe it wasn't the best idea to try and put 200 new end-user computing seats on the same infrastructure that's running the database. They discovered that those I/O patterns aren't exactly complementary. And they discovered really quickly that an infrastructure that doesn't scale easily and quickly is a real inhibitor in the post-March world. They also discovered, in the rush to figure out what to do, what the cloud-first approaches really meant. And that meant lifting and shifting tons of workflow, tons of data, tons of effort into other people's infrastructure, clouds, and trying to remotely educate not always technical remote workers on how to even access it. That was one of the bigger challenges, still is to this very day, getting people to figure out, okay, we're going to change everything in how you've done your job for the last 10 years, but there's nobody going to be there over your shoulder to say, oh yeah, click here, click that, do this, type that. Huge challenge all the way around. We also discovered that when you do that cloud lift and shift, especially with end user computing, it's every bit as much of a Chinese finger trap as server computing was. There's a reason we've seen the move back to hybrid cloud implementation. Some stuff on-prem, some stuff in cloud, and putting data where it needs to be, depending on what the data source is, edge, fog, core, and cloud. The infrastructure that you needed to be able to make this whole thing work, it needed to be flexible, it needed to be scaled up and down easily based on what the needs were. And that wasn't always the case, especially folks that had been on legacy infrastructure for a long time, folks that had been resisting the digital transformation for a variety of reasons. Now, we also learned that something not terribly new to the world anymore, hyperconverged infrastructures. They work hand in glove with VDI. They make things, when implemented hand in glove with a proper VDI implementation, they make remote work seamless, easy, without any of the big lifts and shifts. We also learned that that home network that people were now working from, that same network that they shared with their teenagers and kids, was exposed, wildly exposed. Something like 73% of home networks, it has been determined in just the last 2 months, have some form of malware existent on a device attached to them. And surprise, when you push a VPN connection from a device on that network through to your pristine corporate network, well, that device is hitting that infected, questionable, absolutely unsecure home network first, and just opened up all kinds of security holes. Ask Garmin. They'll answer that for you in a real hurry. And as an extension of that, ransomware and malware attacks, they're through the roof. Cross your fingers and pray proved not to be the right strategy over the course of the last 6 months. We already knew ransomware was growing. For the last 3 years, it has been growing at an insane pace. It's an easy way for bad actors to make money, and along the way, drive businesses out of business or severely impact businesses, city of, county of, hospitals, you name it. And by using VPN, you just made that problem that much worse. Oh, and by the way, the VPN providers themselves became targets. Less than 2 weeks ago, a major VPN provider completely hacked in all stored passwords for 9,000 some odd different sites, compromised. So what do you do? Here we are. Well, what you need to do is implement business resilience immediately. This is something that would have been good to have been implemented before March, but now's good too. Business resilience. Marinate on that term for a second. Now, the textbook definition. Business resilience is a combination of proactive and reactive planning for an organization, blah, 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 blah. Anybody can read from Webster's. What business resilience really means is a combination of complementary technologies. Complementary technologies that enable business to continue no matter what, no matter where, no matter how. An entire suite of interwoven stacks built to make the county continue, the city continue, your business continue. So what are the technologies? What are these interwoven pieces that need to be implemented? First and foremost, like every building, you start with the foundation. And the right foundation is HCI, hyperconverged infrastructure. Lots of different vendors, different ways that it gets pulled together, different purposes behind it, depending on who you're talking to. But at the end of the day, HCI-based infrastructure is the foundational piece that you need to implement the rest in that flexible, scalable, easy to use, easy to implement, don't have to think about it method that enables everything else. So let's start with what that suite provides. Lose any component anywhere at any time, and everything in that core infrastructure just keeps going. Work from anywhere. I've literally had scale customers send me pictures of logging into their workflows from smart fridges, from their Peloton exercise bikes. Make that remote person virtually participate in the office, not push the network out. More on that later. But cybersecurity. This is a big one. Understand that it's not 2006 anymore. The biggest threat to your data isn't necessarily failed drives or an end user with a grudge or a construction guy with a badly placed backhoe. The biggest threat to your data today is the phishing attack, the unpatched zero-day vulnerability. The misplaced click that encrypts every mission-critical piece of data you've got. That is number one on the list of what you have to protect against. Not just backup. Backup's still part of it. Those other threats, those other problems, they haven't gone away. But you can almost conjoin those two into real protection suites. Now, on a properly implemented HCI stack, foundational stack, it participates in that as well. But most importantly, scalability. The ability to, on the fly, as needed, add the bricks that you need, where you need them, when you need them, to support the pieces that need to be added for your business as it goes. So let's focus on the first one. Step one, the first thing on that list of 4 interleaved technologies. Legacy virtual infrastructure, you can see a great example of it on the left there. I like to call that the inverted pyramid of doom. It was the least efficient, least effective way to do virtualization, but it's the one that we all wound up doing for the longest time. That was part of the reason we here at Scale created HC3 in the first place. That old method of virtualization with its servers plus switches plus SAN plus hypervisor plus DR componentry plus, all from different vendors, that wasn't going to cut it. Face it, in that legacy architecture, to do something as trivial as change a period to a comma in a Word doc on a VM, you were looking at 7 data hops each way, coordinated through 5, 6 different kernels on different devices, all layered on top of tons of overhead with management layers, attack points, threat surfaces, and componentry that could break throughout the stack. Now, with HC3, we re-envisioned how virtualization should have been done in the first place. Took a clean sheet of paper to it, if you will. The benefits, the killer app of virtualization, high availability, fault tolerance, and live migration. If you wanted to create an architecture to do those things, but make it so it was novice friendly as well as expert friendly. Make it so you didn't need to be a VCP and a CCNE and a SNIA certified storage engineer, but rather you could take a, I like to say, kid out of the local community college still waving around his A+ cert like he's the first human to ever get one, and have that guy able to stand up the infrastructure, create the workload, set up the virtual machine, set up DR, do live migrations, etc. Managed without all of the licensing without all of the, oh, you want to do this, write me another check silliness that the legacy vendors constantly beat people up for. Made it fast, made it easy, made it autonomous. That's what HC3 really is. Now, on that infrastructure, you can run, I mean, to borrow a phrase from the Postal Service, if it fits, it ships. If it's x86, if it's made to run on Windows, if it's made to run on Linux, if it's made to run on BSD, heck, if it's made to run on Solaris x86, or you're one of the 3 guys left on planet Earth running OS 2, it's going to run on HC3, full stop. But moving forward, let's move on to the next line item, if you will, on that set of 4 technologies. VDI. Having efficient, effective, easy to implement, rapid to deploy VDI implementations. Connection brokered, secure, gatewayed, able to link into your authentication mechanisms regardless of whether it's Active Directory or LDAP or NIS Plus, able to leverage technologies like Duo, etc., so that you can securely get people into their workflows, workloads, but do it without needing VPN at all. Well, that's pretty critical in today's world. Being able to, at a click, roll out additional resources as needed. Being able to have your workforce, no matter if they're at their home, if they're stuck in a hotel somewhere, no matter where, be able to get at their data, their workflows, their applications, business continues. VDI is critical. But if you take a look at those legacy vendors for VDI, you see a painful recurring theme. Complex, expensive, tons of moving parts. Kind of like that, old inverted pyramid of doom, because all of them run on top of that. Only they magnify and extend that complexity. There's a reason that it was never the year of VDI before now. It was too complex. It was too expensive. It caused too much pain. And it was always cheaper to just hand out another laptop. Well, at scale, we solved for that too. We took a very close look at what people were doing wrong all the way back in March. We had implemented the VDI solution that we sell 2.5, almost 3 years ago. And it struck us that people were doing exactly the wrong thing in their panic to get remote workforce enablement done. We've talked about why, so I'm not going to reiterate, but I think you get the point. We needed to do the same thing with VDI that we'd done with virtualization in the first place. Radically simplify it, automate it, make it something that you could stand up and get going in less than an hour. That in half a day, you could have your basic golden master images implemented, VDI desktops being created, and oh, by the way, also use that exact same plumbing to connect to the physical desktops, physical servers, etc. in the environment. So that's what we did at half the cost and a fraction of the complexity of those legacy providers. Let that soak in. Almost any protocol, almost any endpoint device, thick clients, thin clients, HTML5 as well, you literally can get to your workflows from your smartphone, from your smart fridge, from the web browser in your Tesla. Riding your Peloton exercise bike, browsers are ubiquitous. But the best part there is the browser, when connecting that way, it acts as a firewall. What I mean by that is It's that infrastructure, that workflow, whether it's a physical remote desktop machine or a VDI implementation, doesn't matter. It's not exposed to what happens on that endpoint device. It's a reflection in HTML5. HTML5 browsers, they don't run in kernel space on those endpoint devices. It doesn't matter if that endpoint device gets compromised 36 ways to Sunday. It's never making it through to your pristine corporate network, ever. You know, kid can break mom's new laptop. Mom can go grab kid's Barbie tablet and reconnect. It's that simple. Now, we've boiled VDI down to 2 machines, one of which is optimal. The connection broker itself knows how to talk to scale HC3 clusters, knows how to identify golden master images, how to create, when to create, lifecycle manage, etc., all of those VDI-based clones that it's creating for both persistent and non-persistent desktops. It knows how to talk to Active Directory, LDAP, NIS, NIS+, all of your authentication methods. Supports 12, 13 different protocols, everything from VNC to SSH to RDP and Remote FX to you name it. Got it covered. Leaves the endpoint choices wide open. And then there's the gateway, a simple port forward from an internet-facing IP address or URL. Allows those end users to point a browser and get their session natively on whatever the endpoint device is, using the protocols that you choose. No extra licensing costs in that. Let that soak in. That means that the scale customers of ours back in March that needed to get that remote solution rolled out in an hour, they were able to stand up 2 VMs, do a port forward, and push some agents. Done. Now, you remember a little while ago talking about cybersecurity and backup. I said, boy, you know, we really could even conjoin those. So I'm going to. Now, we talked about this earlier, but I cannot emphasize enough. Any of you that have a Garmin, any of you that interact with so very many companies, municipalities, etc., that have been compromised in just the last 6 months know exactly what I'm talking about here. Being able to protect automatically and automatically remediate, don't miss that piece, from those attacks is huge. Now, starting several years ago, Scale partnered with Acronis. Now, we did that after a lot of consideration and talking to almost everybody in the backup and data protection space. Now, we build in, like any good HCI platform, snapshots replication. We can go significantly deeper on snapshots than anybody else in the space, up to 5,982 snaps per virtual hard drive without impacting performance. But snapshots are not backup, and neither of them are cyber protection. We wanted to partner with a company that thought exactly the same way we do. Forward-looking, simplifying, and bringing everything in, all features, all functionalities, at a simple, easy to digest, easy to consume price point. That meant Acronis. Now, the top thing on this list, ransomware protection, malware protection, it's just built in, but it's done differently than everybody else. It uses both behavioral analysis empowered by AI, heuristic analysis, as well as pattern matching. Does it in real time on every machine, every VM in the environment. But what it does is actually watches what's normal for a given machine or workload it's protecting and identifies when, say, that 2012 server that you've got running SQL on your environment that's never had anything encrypted suddenly starts encrypting a given subdirectory. It knows that's not right. That's not normal. It identifies the thread causing that, kills it, rolls those encrypted files back from its own cache to their unencrypted state, and exits the situation without you ever having to get involved, often faster than notifications get to you that something went sideways. Here in a second, I'll actually show you a video of this, just so you can see it for yourselves. Backup. That's part of it too. Being able to put copies of your data on any storage anywhere, whether it's the cloud, that NAS in the corner, a SAN over at your DR site, all of the above at the same time, being able to convert those to alternative hypervisors on the fly as needed. Post-process is just part of the backup process itself, etc. All built in. Some of the most efficient footprint on disk backups as well. So there, once you've incorporated HC3 with Acronis, not only do you have DR and backup and cyber protection, you've got the entire suite covered. And sticking to that autonomous infrastructure notion, you've done it without having to spend your time over and over again on the infrastructure itself, freeing you and your teams up to actually focus on things that move the business forward. Now, I said I was going to demonstrate this that shows an active WannaCry infestation being tripped off by an end user by a phishing scam, both without Acronis and with Acronis agents installed. And what you'll see in real time is exactly what I described. That infestation gets stopped cold in its tracks within seconds of starting. Process is killed off, blacklisted, and isolated. And the actual data structures themselves being unencrypted, and that splash screen from whomever the bad actor is demanding Bitcoin being removed all on its own.
Hi, my name's John. I'm a technician with the racing department here at Acronis. Today, I'd like to demonstrate to you how effective Acronis Active Protection technology really is. First, I'll show you the typical situation of an employee who opens a ransomware package, in this case WannaCrypt, also known as WannaCry, so you can see firsthand how damaging it is. And then I'll show you how Active Protection may help you prevent and revert ransomware attacks just like this. Imagine an employee who receives a very tempting email that is offering insider information about a very popular television program that I'm sure you're familiar with, unless you've been hiding under a rock. The email has an attachment, and once loaded, delivers its payload to the computer. The WannaCry immediately starts encrypting all the files on the machine. The encrypted files cannot be viewed, edited, or even restored manually. Next, the desktop wallpaper is changed to display a very threatening message, and this is followed up with a pop-up window demanding to pay ransom and a countdown clock. If the ransom isn't paid timely, the files can be lost forever. Now let's rewind and do it again with our flagship Acronis Backup 12.5 installed and the Acronis Active Protection feature turned on. Again, our unfortunate employee gets that tasty TV show email and attempts to open the attachment. The WannaCry virus storms to encrypt all the data. However, this time, the Acronis Active Protection detects the undesirable encryption, stops it, and displays the alert similar to this in the Acronis Backup 12.5 console. The system then automatically reverts all the files that the virus was able to encrypt, so our employee may not have even noticed that something happened. Acronis Active Protection uses sophisticated on-the-fly analysis and artificial intelligence to monitor your system. It constantly observes patterns in how data files are being changed on a system. One set of behaviors may be typical and expected. Another set of behaviors may signal a suspect process taking hostile actions against the files. Acronis Active Protection looks at these actions and compares them to malicious behavior patterns. It detects threats based on already identified patterns as well as new learned ones. If ransomware begins to encrypt files, Acronis quickly detects and halts the process. Because Acronis is a backup solution, any data that was exposed and encrypted before the process was halted can be recovered from a variety of backup sources. Not only do other anti-ransomware solutions fail to commonly end an attack once it's started, they have no way to recover the files that have been encrypted by the attack. Acronis Active Protection detects and deflects attacks and restores files of any size.
When you combine these together, this enables you to easily and cost-effectively create real backup data off-platform to whatever makes the most sense to your specific need. SAN, NAS, SMB shares, cloud, want to send a copy to Glacier because it's the cheapest there is, want to send a copy to Azure because you've got Azure credits from your Office 365 subscription or O365 or whatever Microsoft's calling it this week. Go for it. You're enabled across the board. Done on an all-you-can-eat pricing model. No extra license for this, no extra license for that. Oh, you want to use a tape drive? That's a different. None of that silliness. So what you've got here, looking at business resilience, is a solution that fits anywhere, from the smallest of the small, from the edge to the fog, to the core, to the cloud. Self-healing, self-load balancing, can lose any component anywhere at any time, and everything just keeps going. The single most efficient I/O path in the HCI space today. With HC3, there is nothing analogous to Essentials, Essentials Plus, Standard, Standard Enterprise, Enterprise Plus. None of the licensing for this DR piece or that feature functionality that you find with the legacy virtualization vendors. It's all just built in. We don't charge anything extra for it. It's all there. Costs you nothing. Scale care support. What good infrastructure conversation can be had without talking about the people that keep everything going? Support teams. When we started Scale, so many years ago, one of the things that drove us nuts historically was the fact that when you ordered a component from some vendor out there, you could get a lead, copper, silver, gold, platinum, or unobtainium support contract that, depending on costs and all of these other factors, would allow, Jane from your team to be able to talk to support on the second Thursday of every month between the hours of 5 and 6. It's ridiculous. We decided from moment one with Scale, everybody gets premium support, 24/7, 365, first year included, not to play the sliding scale increasing cost games on support for year 2, 3, 4, 5. Make it fixed, make it simple. Not hire help desk or tier 1, but actually hire tier 2 or better actual degreed engineers that know what they're doing. And make sure that when you do have an issue, even though your cluster self-heals from it on the fly, that you get live transferred to an actual engineer who knows what the heck they're doing in less than 90 seconds. Now, there's a bullet point on here. Cloud integration with Google Cloud Platform. We call it Cloud Unity. We were the very first to market with Layer 2 VXLAN overlay. We create nodes on Google that participate in your local network using your network schemes that inherit all of Scale's built-in snapshot replication, runtime, etc., so that you can fail everything over, all of your workloads over to running on Google, running in the cloud with a click and not have to change networking, not have to touch DNS, so that virtual machines you start up there can get their DHCP assigned IP addresses from the DHCP server sitting in your rack 4 feet to your right. What you've got here, when you pull all 4 of these technologies together, is an entire stack that runs the gamut of business resilience and does it at a price point nobody else gets anywhere near. All pieces API level integrated directly with each other. The entire virtualization stack, every level built to work directly with each other. An infrastructure that lets you not have to think about your infrastructure and focus on making sure the business just keeps moving forward. That's what business resilience is. That's what Scale has brought to the table. I wasn't kidding when I said we have platforms across the board. Same stack, same exact thing to know. When you know one, you know them all. Support nobody can touch, and quite frankly, a list of customers going back over a decade that you wouldn't even necessarily think about when you think about Scale. But ranging from the Royal Court of Bahrain to the City of London to your local Menards. It's all on HC3. It's all running the same stack, the same suite I've been talking about. Now, you don't have to take my word for any of this. We have the most highly rated, highly reviewed infrastructure stack available today. Go hit up Spiceworks, TrustRadius, TechValidate, Gartner. See for yourself. 5-star rated on Gartner Peer Insights. Yeah, everybody likes to trot out their list of rewards. Me personally, I find it a little embarrassing. But the ones on here that I am the most proud of are actually these two. For the last decade, those two have been won by Dell EMC VMware until last year when we actually entered. We've cleaned house 2 years in a row. The others didn't even come close to it. You can see for yourself. Now, with that being said, if there's questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, things you guys would like to understand a little better, be happy to take the time to answer them for you.
Excellent. This has been great, Alan. We do have some questions that have come in, so I will read those off to you, and we can take some of those live here. So the first one we'll start with is it has to do with the HC3 Cloud Unity. So it's my understanding that the current use case for GCP integration is disaster recovery as a service. Anything in the works to expand upon those use cases with GCP?
Yes, but I'm not going to talk about it just yet. I wouldn't want to ruin the surprise for you. Okay? But I will say this much. I do have several folks that bought GCP, bought Cloud Unity as a DR strategy, part of their DR progress, okay, plan. Wound up doing failovers. For example, one of my customers, a restaurant chain down in Puerto Rico, got hit by a couple of hurricanes about 2 years ago. Failed all of their infra over to their Cloud Unity instance. Things have long since been rebuilt, but they found it incredibly easy and functional to just keep running production right there off GCP. And that's fine. That's the beauty of our approach here, is it's very much a run anywhere approach, allowing you to put what you need, where you need it, when you need it, and bounce runtime around as needed.
All right, excellent. Yeah, and I believe that there's actually a case study out on that Google had written with that customer in Puerto Rico. So
you know, I think you're right.
Yep, you can search for that and it's out there. So all right, excellent. There was actually another part to that question. It's a bit different, but what is Scale's current play with containers or future plans?
Sure. So containers. Containers are an interesting entity to me. Now, historically speaking, there was a lot of smoke and action around the container space about 4 or 5 years ago. But the saturation pace of containers seems to have kind of stalled on net new. Those who adopted them fairly early on and started writing native application space for microcontainers, et cetera, continue to expand on that investment, but there's nowhere near the rate of net new uptake as there was just a couple of years ago. Now, that being said, I'm not here to say that we don't support them. We absolutely do. A ton of my customers looked at containers early on and went, this is great. However, there is no inherent high availability, depending on what their use case for containers was. Some people, spring up a microserver to do a bit of processing and kill it. Well, you don't need high availability for that. But folks that wanted to contain sprawl, one copy of an OS footprint, containerize the applications that run around them, they were always held back by the fact that there was no inherent high availability whatsoever in Docker, in any of those container-based approaches. So what they wound up doing, originally they looked at doing this with, say, VMware, Hyper-V, but the overhead was excessive, to say the least. They looked at doing it with some competing HCI platforms, but those competing HCI platforms, they suck up a ton of resource in creating their virtual SAN appliances, their CVMs, their VSAs, their OmniCube Federation managers, et cetera. Literally an obscene amount of resource. And I haven't really touched on that here, but that made those platforms impractical to virtualize containers. However, in the scale world with HC3, our resource utilization is a tiny fraction of what those other approaches are. With one of those competing offerings, they burn up to 150 gig of RAM and up to 10 cores per node on their HCI infrastructure. With Scale, we burn a total of a gig to 4 gig per node and a tenth of a single core. Now, what that translated to is it made good sense to run Docker in a virtual machine on Scale. Absolutely did, because then you got the best of both worlds, high availability, fault tolerance, and footprint reduction and control of sprawl through containerization. But fast forward to today. Tons of my customers still do exactly that. But there's work that we've been doing internally. And I don't want to say too much here, because again, don't want to spoil the surprise. But the ability to natively run containerized apps in the HC3 ecosystem at the same hypercore level that the hypervisor itself runs at. Well, let's just say that's a thing. Like I said, not going to give you too much detail on it. I don't want to spoil the reason for us to meet up next, but it's coming.
Excellent. All right, so here's one, Alan, that I don't know if you've ever gotten, so hopefully you can answer it.
Sure.
But I am new to Scale, and I need to understand what sort of resources need to be deployed for implementing all of my VMware and the licenses around that.
Well, that's the beautiful part about Scale. There is no VMware code of any kind at any level, and there's no VMware licensing needed with HC3 at all. None. All of that legacy licensing cruft simply goes away with HC3. There is no more writing that monstrous, Enterprise Plus support renewal check to VMware every year. There is no more of that, oh, I want to have Site Recovery Manager, or I want to have this feature or that feature, write another check. With Scale, all that's just built in. Costs you nothing extra, and there is no VMware. Probably one of the things I should do here is show you a simple slide. Just one. that isn't all the things you do need with scale, but rather all the things you don't need. So I'm going to show you that real quick. But I will say this much to whomever answered that question. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, or you just need a hand, you of course can call our support team at any time. But I'll go you one further. You can email me directly. My email is right there at the bottom of that screen. Feel free. I'll take some time out of my day to help you out.
Perfect. All right. And I figured you had an answer for that, so it was a bit of a joke when I said I hope you could answer it. So there is one here. Do you have any testing that you've done with login VSI around the VDI implementation?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Login VSI is what I would consider the de facto standard for sizing a VDI environment. Okay. Now, you have in any VDI space, any VDI customer implementation, you've got a wide range of possible workloads. Login VSI does a very good job of helping you to categorize those. Power users, task workers, office workers, so on and so forth. So we've made absolutely sure as we've gone through the VDI rollout process over the last several years, this is something we've been working on for several years now. It's why we've got reference customers, happy customers, coast to coast and around the world running Scale VDI and HC3. But for example, some of our most baseline simple 1250 hybrid clusters, simple 3-node cluster, okay, has a flash tier, has spinning disk tiers, happily holding, call it 130, 135 users before getting even close to VSI Max and Login VSI. But our stack is so ridiculously efficient that we've been able to take it all the way down to things as small as our HE150, something you would recognize as the Intel NUC. Now you say NUC, ha, that's tiny. Yeah, it is, but it's perfect for edge use. And then we thought, you know, we've been getting requests for VDI at the edge at a crazy pace, especially since March. So we even took the time to run Login VSI against a simple 3-node cluster of those, and happily holding 25 users without hitting VSI Max on something that's less than, what, $6,000?
Excellent. Yeah, and I believe, as a matter of fact, I know this. I'll make note of that question and we'll follow up. We actually had a third-party group, Storage Review, who did an entire article on our implementation of VDI, and there's actually some login VSI tests that are documented in that, and I believe we have it in a white paper on our site too, so I can follow up to that question with some content around that. So.
Sure. I've got a question here from Chris Tran that I'm going to answer. How long does it take to get the VDI solution up and working from start to finish? I've had it done by customers in less than an hour, Chris. If you've already got your HC3 cluster up and running, okay? It literally is just 2 VMs. Hell, we prepackaged them for you. You import those 2 VMs, hand out their IPs. Those 2 VMs are the gateway and the broker. Then you simply run down through the list on the left of what that broker wants configured. And if you want, I'll even go one step further and show you, because it only takes a second. Let me do this. Once you've imported those 2 virtual machines, point a browser at the broker, log in, grab your agent for your golden master image, tell it about your clusters, tell it about your Active Directory, create yourself a pool. In creating the pool, you tell it which golden master image to use, how to identify them, tell it about Active Directory, and you're off to the races. As a matter of fact, you guys may have noticed when I switched presentations a second ago, a Scale UI interface up and running. This entire presentation is actually coming to you and being hosted on and by a VDI session that I use every day on my HC3 cluster. This VM right there. Audio, video, everything. It just works.
Excellent. All right, we got time for a couple more questions here. One that I've had come in. I currently have a use case for about 325 users for VDI. Is this solution good for me?
Absolutely. You know, the legacy VDI providers, the problem that they have largely lies in who they targeted their solution for. Like so many other technology companies in the world, they built their solution for the very large enterprise. They built a solution that's fantastic for the Fortune 50, okay for the Fortune 2000, and absolutely mind-numbingly unrealistic for those of us in the real world. I'll let that soak all the way in. With HC3, with Scale VDI, we wanted to build a solution specifically for the needs of people that could use VDI the most, and yet were least equipped to deal with the insanity that went into rolling out those legacy VDI solutions. We built the solution to be absolutely perfect for anybody from, call it 15 to 2,000 seats, 3,000 seats. You know, from the hospital in Illinois, 600-bed hospital, okay, that replaced their entire Citrix infrastructure with Scale VDI over 2 years ago, to the city in Texas that replaced its View infrastructure that never would quite work just right, and then expanded it from just the waterworks to the entire city. This isn't us just talking about it. This is stuff that's been done up, running for years, and is highly reviewed, highly recommended by the people actually using it.
Excellent. All right, we got time for one more. We are bumping up against the hour, so we'll take this question and then we'll close things up. The question was, if storage is maxed on an HC3, is there a preference for attached storage to HC3?
So, to answer this problem, this question for you, Naeem, and do it justice, that requires longer than the 2.5 minutes we have left. Because to understand the answer to this question, you really have to understand how storage works in an HC3 world. So here's what I'll do for you. If you reach out to me at that same email address, or reach out to Dusty or any of the folks at Scale, I'll have them carve an hour off of my calendar, and you and I can sit down and go over it soup to nuts.
Awesome. That's great. All right, so I want to thank everyone for joining. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. We are bumping up against the hour. If you are currently engaged with Scale and have any questions or would like to speak to us about any of these solutions, feel free to reach out to your current sales contact. You also, as Alan said, can reach him at alan@scalecomputing.com. You can reach me at dusty@scalecomputing.com. You also can use info@scalecomputing.com, and there's an easy to fill out contact us form on our homepage at the bottom. So with that, I want to say thank you, Alan, for bringing this solution and presenting today. And thank you to all of our attendees. And we will follow up with you in the next coming days. And everyone, please stay safe. Thank you.